Markets. We want to dig more into that particular news on Facebook. Of course, the FTC, the judge dismissing that FTC antitrust case. Let's go to Tom Giles, Bloomberg executive editor for technology out there in San Francisco. Tom, how big a headwind was this particular case coming from the FTC?
The most significant antitrust case that was pending against Facebook. It had significant implications for the business. But now a judge has basically said the FTC and this coalition of states have not brought sufficient evidence in order to really mount a case against them. So, you have a lot of, as the previous speaker was talking about, you have a lot of headwinds against the technology industry. There's no denying that whatsoever. DOJ, states attorneys generals, and you've also got this legislative push in Congress. But in terms of the FTC, which was the real, which was really the driving force behind the action on Facebook, that has really suffered a setback here.
Tom, it's interesting. From what I can glean, the court is dismissing the complaint, but not the case altogether, giving them an option to refile within 30 days.
They can. That's right. That's right. But as I understand it from the legal expertise on our team, this definitely makes it a much more, there's a lot of, this makes the hurdle much higher for the FTC.
Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt you here, Tom. We're also getting some headlines on another big tech company, this on Alphabet's Google. Here, antitrust investigators at the U.S. Justice Department, they've stepped up scrutiny right now of Google's digital ad and marketing practices here. So this was a probe, of course, that had been started during the Trump administration. It appears the Biden administration is accelerating this, Tom. Can you put this into perspective for us, particularly with Google and particularly against the backdrop of these state lawsuits being thrown out against Facebook?
Yeah, at a time when you're seeing the FTC having a significant setback versus Facebook, the DOJ, its case is not losing any steam against Alphabet, the owner of Google, right? So the DOJ has already sued Google on its search advertising business. What the news that we just broke now is telling you that the DOJ is also looking at the display ad business. This is the business whereby Google buys and sells advertising across the internet. And the DOJ is concerned and has been interviewing businesses over the last several weeks and months about whether this business, like the search business, is also anti-competitive. What's really interesting here is that this is an investigation that had gotten underway under the Trump administration. And what this shows you is that it's not losing any steam, and in fact could be gaining steam under the Biden administration. So, when Facebook wins a really big victory in getting this FTC case dismissed, at the same time, Google is getting a real setback. Now, another thing to remember when it comes to the antitrust action against the big technology companies is it's not just the FTC, it's not just the DOJ. You've got the state's attorneys general, and you've got Congress. So this is happening on multiple fronts. So even though Facebook has scored a really big victory, it's not out of the woods yet. And certainly this headline on Google shows you they are definitely not out of the woods yet.
Just remind us, Tom, how much bipartisan agreement there is as to what are the regulatory impact they want to be taken, not just on Facebook, but on Alphabet, on Amazon, or all of these big technology companies. Is it likely to make a difference to the business models going forward?
Well, so there is bipartisan support. So that is something that, there are areas, not in everything, and I won't go into the specifics. I mean, there are areas where Republicans and Democrats disagree on big tech, but there is some consensus within Congress that big tech has become too big, has become too powerful. It's not being a good steward of the power and responsibility that it has, right? With the information that it amasses on us when it comes to privacy, when it comes to a whole litany of things. How much can they change practices? I mean, if you see them coming in and talking about breaking up big technology, and Congress is able to get this passed and get it to pass muster with the courts, that does present a significant hurdle for the technology industry. There's a lot of questions about just how legal this is, how much this is going to stand up in court, and we've seen from the FTC today, from the FTC dismissal, these things are not a shoo-in. Courts are going to look at these things with skepticism and ask whether is there evidence that these companies have become too big, too powerful, and do we believe that breaking them up will be better for the consumer, will be better for competition? That's certainly, the court shows you today that that's not a done deal. That's not a definite yes or no.
Tom, how is big tech thinking about the multiple different lawsuits that they're all facing? Some of the states, some from the federal government, some they partner up with the FTC. There's a separate DOJ investigation. Is big tech perhaps thinking that they're getting fired at from all cylinders, or does this appear scattered and it gives big tech a lot of time to tackle different perhaps lawsuits that are coming from them from all different players who can't team up together? How are they thinking about all of these multiple different suits?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things that they can be doing, right? There's a lot of lobbying. There's a lot of money that's being spent for them to get their message across in Congress. There's certainly, they have legions of lawyers who are doing everything they can to build a robust case to push back against what the government is saying. And remember, even if any of these actions are going to result in, big fines or, more importantly, changes to behavior, it's going to be a long, protracted battle in the court. There's no question about that. So right now, if you're big tech, you are putting together the best possible legal case you possibly can. Internally, externally, all the big firms are getting involved in this, and then you're lobbying. And you're lobbying Congress, and you're trying to get your message across.
All right.
And right now, the market is putting its weight behind big tech.
Okay, all right, so that's going to be good for all the lawyers out there. We'll get them to buy the drinks next time we sit down with them. I am curious, though, about the distraction, Tom. I mean, we all sort of remember the big Microsoft case from years back, and of course, Microsoft ultimately went on to thrive, but we know that for several years, it was a major distraction for this company. It was a major distraction for investors. And I'm wondering how much of a risk that becomes for some of these tech companies, particularly when it's not just the states, it's not just the DOJ or the FTC. You have at least 4 different bills in Congress right now, all seeking to take aim at these companies. And it's a relatively bipartisan effort.
Well, Romain, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is a management distraction. Every conversation they have with their investors, every conversation they have with the media, and even internally, they're having to field questions about, well, where do we stand on this? And I would say even more important than the management distraction, because you can compartmentalize. To my big question, and the thing that you have to really watch, is how much is it going to change their behavior before there's even an outcome, before there's even a verdict? To what extent does the idea of scrutiny have a chilling effect on what these companies do, right? We're already seeing, can they go out and cut big deals? Can they go make big acquisitions? If you think strategically that the right thing for one of these companies to do is to go out and make a strategic acquisition, they're going to think twice about whether that's a really good idea at a time when everybody in the world is looking at you and saying you're already too big, you're already too powerful, and you've already amassed too much market share, market control.
Tom, just to push back on that, though, a little bit, we haven't seen them slow down. You've seen a lot of deals, particularly from even Facebook as of late, no?
Are they transformative though?
Yeah.
Are they going to go out and change their existing business? I mean, one of the things that, one of the interesting big deals that we've seen recently was Amazon MGM. Now, that's an interesting deal, but it doesn't support Amazon's main business, right? This is an adjacency, right, for them. So if you're Facebook, if you're Amazon, if you're Apple, are you going to go out and make a significant acquisition in your area where that's already under a great deal of scrutiny? That's where I think there's going to be a little bit of a chilling effect.
Remind us, I thought the FTC had just got to its top ranks, a real technology sort of tackler, someone who is likely to be wanting to be looking at breakups of these particular companies. And is the FTC not the way to go? I understand that they're going to be refiling for Facebook, for example.
Right. Well, Lina Khan, as we all know, is one of the foremost thinkers out there on antitrust. Particularly, her work on Amazon was really groundbreaking. She was just named. She has yet to make her mark. And I would say that, having this decision come down very early in your tenure does not bode well. But on the other hand, it could be a situation where, this makes them fight harder. We have yet to hear from her, and we'll be listening, and we'll be really pressing FTC to give us any indication we can, and hopefully we'll break it here on Bloomberg about what their strategy is and how they're going to regroup after the courts have basically pushed back on your big landmark case against Facebook.